there we go. Yeah. That was really weird. For whatever reason, both my desktop audio and mic weren't synced up to the correct thing. But yeah, hey guys. Yeah, chapter 4 today. I'm actually really excited. I mean, I'm kind of on the fence, because I'm having a lot of fun with this, but at the same time, I want to see where the story is going. You know? I still have to beat Undertale too, oh my god. I feel like for the next, like, couple weeks, all I'm going to be playing is either Deltarune or Undertale. Which could be fun, could get boring really quick, and we'll see. But yeah. Let's hop on in. There we go. Right, because I died and lost like a bunch of progress. Is this music different? This hits so hard, what the hell? That's crazy! This was not this much of... Why am I so small? Excuse me! Why am I tiny? Hold on, let me fix that. There we go. That's better. That's so weird. Wayne's chariot cannot be stopped. I'm sure there's a point to this room. I just don't quite see it. Like, oh, you can talk to the barracks, you can talk to a weird guy. That was good. Peace. I'll then cast Pacify. Tony Fox put his entire pussy into the soundtrack this chapter. God damn. This music is like so pretty. Like, the music is always good, but like... shit. Lullaby. Am I still dreaming? There's a little ho-hums, ho-hum. This'll become tired. As long as I dodge everything here. Crap! Seriously? So hard. There's a little ho-hums, ho-hums. Dazzle, defend. Dazzle, Dizzle. As I spare missile. Nice. Oh, now the water cooler's empty! That's a fun little detail. Alright, I need to look up how to get the end of this chapter. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter much. Why is my mouth not moving? There. There we go. That's better. Oh yeah, that's way better. So up this way. So do the recruits go to... Oh, it's this way. Oh, right, this room. There's $200. Yes. How much will you throw in? So there's no... Why is there only like 5 input? There are 120,020 dark dollars in the fountain. Oh, it's still so dark in here. And there's something up there. It's so hard to see. It's a wall made of bells. Climb it. Too slippery to climb. Only add something. Only if you had something to help you climb. So I have a feeling I need to talk to that little goober. I was like climbing the walls. And then I think I'll be able to climb. That's my theory anyway. Like one of these little goobers. Unless I need to buy climb? I literally have no idea. Need anything else? Buy. Oh. Wait for a guard. Garf mark? Defense. Good. Right, I need to play the piano. Oh, I don't think that was correct. Unless it is. Oh, right, because... Right, and then I can get the other piano over here. How do I get through that gap, though? Surely there's a way. Right. Yeah, it's just there. Let's go there, but unless I move that green over, which I think I'll have to do. This. No, like here. Yeah. Here we go. Now I can get the chest. The chest inside was absorb axe. Absorb axe added to weapon. Equip. +8. Plus vampire? What the hell does vampire do? Weird. Wait, how would I get up there? Yes. There we go. Open the treasure chest. Inside was Mystic Band. Mystic Band was added to armors. Chest is empty. So that ups magic, but lowers defense? What I'm reading here? Yeah, that ups the magic, but lowers defense. Yeah, I don't know how worth it that is. Wait. Ginger Guard, that has a different... Steel bangle tempered by extreme flame. Its shape is humanoid in nature. Oh, it's a gingerbread person cut out. Okay, I get it. I don't know why it's not... Okay. I guess everything's fine for Ozzy for now. I know there's a way to get both of these together, I just cannot remember right now. That doesn't look correct. What the hell is happening? I should not be lagging. I guess I can go this way now and look at the telescope. Telescope. Observe suit. Observe browsing. Aww! Oh my god, that's so cute! Why is he so freaking adorable? I wonder if it's in here too? Huh? Sorry, Chris. Just, looking for something we could use as a scrapbook. Dude, this ladder could be cool. I'll say his room. And we can put furniture on the ceiling, climb to it. Or room for partying on the floor. Yes. Sweet. Marked. I'll swipe it when he isn't looking. There. Now that's... I should heal. Save. So I don't have to do all that again. What does Susie react to? The telescope. And she just kind of looks at it. Oh. Aww. What does Chris do? This is kind of just standing there. Are they really not going to do anything? I guess not. It makes sense. Alright, the piano here's dead. Yeah. I wonder if we need to play something specific. Perhaps there's a hint somewhere. Wait, the puzzle? Thought Chris was just jamming. Well, it was. Contraction jamming. Hello. What? Hey, don't you think this would be sweet for Rousey's room? You won't have to, like, sleep on the floor. Take it. Hell yeah, give me a hand. Okay, damn, it's heavy. Let's just take, like... Yeah, that's good enough. He can make a pillow for it. That's better than a bed anyway. More defense. Oh, Chris, this seems like a complicated puzzle. Would you like any advice to, speed up solving it? Park your butt, mister. Okay. Aww. He's so cute. I did this incorrectly. Oh, there we go. And then... there. Isn't there, like, another thing? Yeah, there's that. For some reason, it's not quite operating. Unless I do something like that. But that's not really gonna help. Unless I do that. Oh my god, I'm a genius. I solved it. The treasure chest inside was revivement. Well, I mean, that's still good. That up and then... boom. We're so goated. The conundrum's last 4 tones. Looks kinda like notes? Chris, maybe you can play them on a piano somewhere. Good idea, Susie, but doesn't the song look, a little unfinished? Huh? Yeah, guess we gotta find the other half. I'm close, let's go. What? Wanted the couch? Should have called shotgun first. I think I'm parked. Parallel parked? As far as I know, I'm within the lines. Aww. I'm so good at this. I'm gonna get, like, an award in dodging sprites. Oh, I might lose that award. Blech. Oof. This is like a crossy road. god. Okay, nothing comes this way. Ow. And then up here? Conundrum's first 4 notes. Oh, Chris, it's the second half of the melody. Now you just need to play it. Yeah, unless there's like a third half. There isn't. Oh, that takes you like straight. But what if there's a chest in there? And you want loot? Oh, that just takes you straight to the room anyways. Weird. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Ugh. Don't walk out into traffic, teehee. Nice. Nice, Chris. All we had to do was follow the prophecy thing. It's that easy. Maybe we should just do whatever it says? How about it, Rose? Want to memorize it for us? That's okay, Susie. I already know it. Oh, okay. Sweet. Go back and save and heal and save. Alright, I should go see the little bell dude. Or cup or whatever the hell he is. How are we for recruits? Oh, I need to get another Balthazar. And then I have them all. It shouldn't be too hard, right? Where's the little cup guy? That guy's like on top. There's one that's climbing, yes. Looks like you look like he's got the right tools. Our princesses, the water fairies, wait for us in the high above. Climb, climb we must. Yes, there's one down here too. Any good cup knows a princess's value is equal to their height. Is there an egg in the stained glass? I see a piano-like organ rests above, opening the way for those who play it. Fortunately, I lack the grip strength to reach such a place, but do you? Currently, yes. No more guys here? That's a shame. Let's head up here. I assume the diamond thing is something we have to unlock, so I don't have to worry about, like, potentially missing it. That's my hope, at least. Lamb. Yes, smells like scented candles. Balthazar. A nice massage. Ow. Smells like teens. Smells like spirits. A nice massage. Surely that wasn't all the mercy, right? Balthazar breathes fog of sunbeam on warm wood. Rose lit up. Room got smoky, other enemies became tired. Ah, that wakes me up. Ouch. Glee looks tired, perhaps Rose's magic pacify would be effective. I don't understand why it's reminding me that Rose has that at this point in the game. Susie spread Balthazar. Rose cast pacify. There we go. Now you can just go straight through here. Oh, there's another safe point right. Down the corridor, darkness lies in wait. Shining only in your own eyes, the light defies it. Recruits. Nice. Hey, Rose, if you know the whole prophecy already, why didn't you just say how to do the piano? Huh? Well, I just thought, isn't it better if I don't say anything? Why? But hey, I think I found a light. Whoops. Oh, good job. Oh. Ow. Here, let me... Everyone feeling better? Yeah, thanks. What's this way, though? Nothing. Always gotta check in case there's something. Light. Who dare bring light here? Well, those are both the same. Go back. You shouldn't come here. This zone is forbidden. Continue and may find yourself spooked in the dark. Oh, the light's getting smaller. Very well. If you come closer to this place, then you may find the dark has come to you. Darkness constricts you. TP getting reduced outside of treasure. Jackenstein? Go ho ho, there's no escape from the dark zone unless you leave. Oh yeah. Too dark to see near the walls. There's a texture of a dog playing maracas in here. Go back. You are taking too long. You are taking too long. Ow. Ow. Youch. I have to go through all that again? You're... Huh? Oh my god? What the hell? Too dark to see near the walls. What the heck was that pumpkin? That was scary. Just kidding, that was mine. Huh? Oh god. Oh god. Oh no. Ouch. Oh god, I'm really low on health. No, please, please, please. Oh no. Oh my god, 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 oh my god. Atmosphere feels tense. You can use Unleash. What the hell are these? There's this unlimited brilliant light. You dare bring lights to my lair? Haha, in this place of true dark, light has no effect on me. What are these noises? Oh my god. Too dark to see near the walls. There's something very Susie-like in here. That's me, dumbass. Scarlixer on Curtis. Use the Scarlixer. No, the light. It has effects on me. Stop using that. Terrible. Go too dark. Oh, man. trying to go. Wait, why is there a chimney to go up? Oh god, do I have to escape up there? Oh my god, please, no, please, please. Oh my god, oh my god! That was insane! What the hell? Oh my god. I'll say, just use a magnet. Go back before long, go back before long. Oh god, oh god. Shit, fuck! Oh my god! That's insane! Light up. I was like, light up the light grew larger and stronger. You didn't go back. Frowny face. Shit. That was insane! Chris, get up. Wait. The blue flame flickers with the vision of battle unfinished. Return to dark. I should have grabbed more healing shit. Okay, I have everything, never mind. Scaredy cat. Defense down, speed up, 2% TP. Go, go, go. There's no escape from the dark zone unless you leave. Too dark to see near the walls. Go back. You're taking too long. You're taking too long. How about my taking too long? I should probably just go in like a straight line here. That's not too bad in the way of... No, I'm not! Be nice to me! Oh my god! Too dark to see near the walls. Texture of a dog. Fence down, speed up. That doesn't sound good at all. Magic, light up. As I light up, the light grew larger and stronger. What the heck was that pumpkin? That was scary. Just kidding, that was mine. Oh, I see where I am now. Oh no, oh fuck. This is so scary, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Too dark to see. Oh, there's a pit here. Dark candy on Rose, I guess. Oh no, I can't find my pumpkin, but maybe I'll find you. Come on! I was right there, please! Atmosphere feels tense, you can use Unleash. And then everyone heal themselves up. Crystal emitted a brilliant light. Susie used the TV dinner. Rousey used the dark Scalyx. You dare bring lights to my lair? Haha. In this place of true dark, light has no effect on me. Mamma mia! It's so hard to chase. Honestly, staying near the middle is probably the best choice for that. Too dark to see near the walls. There's something fluffy in here. Chris? As I lit up, light grew. No, the light, it has effects on me. Stop using that. Terrible. Go too dark. Oh shit! Oh my god. There we go. Too dark to see near the walls. As I lit up, light grew. You didn't go back. Frowny face. I'm getting my ass beat right now by these stupid little orbs. Oh, it's a little chessboard. There we go. Too dark to see near the walls. Like that needs 60% TP now? Damn. I'm not Susie. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Instead, Mr. Very Nice Guy. Leave. Oh my god! In what universe can you get through this? That's crazy! There's like a scales. Ow. Ow. Shit. You're taking too long? Is taking too long? The atmosphere feels tense. You can use Unleash. Crystal Soul emanated a brilliant light. No, not the light. It burns. To think my own pellets would be used against me. It's not fair he can move through the walls and I cannot. Everything seems okay. No it does not. Rousey. Chrissy is the Scalyxer. Enough, my patience runs thin. No more keys, stress and humiliation. Oh my god. Oh fuck. Son of a bitch! Rousey, you stupid little baby! Why are you so squishy and soft and like a fucking damage sponge? I need like spaghetti code or something to heal all of us. Continue. Storage. Yeah, I need items. No wonder I was doing so bad. Spaghetti code. Deluxe dinner. And yes, this. That'll actually like really help. The blue flame flickers with the vision of battle unfinished. So if I like immediately use this, I'm gonna be like really well off. Tension bit, defend. Go ho ho, there's no escape from the dark zone unless you leave. I guess I could just get that on my way out. Do I see the walls? There's texture of a dog playing maracas here. Oh, unleash cost 60%? Damn. Go back. You're taking too long. You're taking too long. Ouch. I mean, good news is I have enough for unleash now. Yeah, atmosphere feels tense. You can use unleash. And then, actually, I mean, it's good for health mostly. Crystal emanated a brilliant light. I should have used light up. You dare bring lights to my lair? Haha, in this place, true darkness. Light has no effect on me. I like the voices here, though. Staying near the center seems to be the move. Here we go. Dark to see me in the walls. There's something very Susie-like in here. That's me, dumbass. As I lit up, the light grew larger and stronger. No, the light, it has effects on me. Stop using that. Terrible. Go to dark. Shit. Ow, 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 ow. Oh, please, please, please. Oh my god, oh my god. Too dark to see in the walls. There's something fluffy in here. Good Chris? As I lit up, light grew. Oh no, I can't find my pumpkin, but maybe it'll find you. I should just head up here anyways. Oh, you can just escape. Too dark to see in the walls. There's something very Susie-like in here. Spaghetti code, and then treasure hunt. Susie sniffs out treasure. It's easier to pick stuff up. Just use the spaghetti code. Go back before long. Go back before long. Ah, there. Too dark to see in the walls. There's a pit here. Oh my god, why is everyone dead? What the hell happened? I guess use this on Susie. You didn't go back. Frowny face. Oh my god. Oh, I forgot this one was a fucking nightmare. Shit. Shit. One more hit and I'm like actually... this is so hard. Yeah, I don't know what I meant to have and not meant to have at this point. Storage. Okay, so I still have everything. Let me try... Let-ups attack, but nothing that positively affects my defense there. Emerald card. Silver card. Oh, ginger guard helps Susie. Wait, why is Ryder 2 better than Dainty Scarf? That was the magic though, so. Okay, this ups defense and magic. This lowers defense, but again, ups defense and magic. So I think we're going 2 royal pins on Ralsei. It's probably not good that I'm using chapter 2 items in chapter 4, but okay, everyone there is recruited. Blue flame flickers with the vision of a battle unfinished. Return to dark. Item. Dungeon bit. Treasure hunt. And light up. Susie sniffs out treasure, it's either pick stuff up. I'll say lit up like stronger and lighter. We're in the dark zone. This also takes like no TP, I think. Or like basically none. Go back. You're taking too long. You're taking too long. Okay, this is definitely like way helpful. Too dark to see near the walls. There's something very Susie-like in here. Was it lit up like grew? What the heck was that pumpkin? That was scary. That's kidding. That was me. I keep thinking I'm over at the key. But no, that's not me. This is like way quicker route than before. Uh-huh. Don't worry, I know which way to go. Ow. Ow. There we go. Dragonstein, Unleash. Susie can treasure hunt, and Ralsei can light up. Press laminated brilliant light. Susie sniffs out treasure. Ralsei lit up light crew. You dare bring lights to my lair? Haha. In this place, the true dark light has no effect on me. Too dark to see near the walls. There's something fluffy in here. Ralsei lit up like... No, the light, it has effects on me. Stop using that. Terrible. Go too dark. Ow. Nice, it's like a skill issue on my part, honestly. I'm going to preemptively come up here because it's scary. There. Too dark to see near the walls. There's something very Susie-like in here. Susie sniffs out treasure. Ralsei lit up light crew. Go back before long. Go back before long. Oh god, oh god, oh god. There we go. You're in the dark zone. Use this on Susie, and then Susie can treasure hunt, or else it can light up. Susie sniffs up treasure, Rousey lights up like crew. Then go back, frowny face. Ow. This damage is such a pain in the ass. Like, holy shit. Like, I'm actually going to die if I don't be careful. And like, you can't break here. Or else he's gonna get you. That sphere feels tense, you can use Unleash. Well, that would be great. Actually, relying on Chris is probably the best option here. No, we're Mr. Nice Guy instead. Mr. Very Nice Guy. Leave. This isn't nice. This is hurting me. Ouchie. Shit. Just because this guy's like nice and slow. Motherfucker! This is so hard! How do people beat this? My controller just fell off my desk. It's not your fate. It sure feels like it. Please, don't give up. I'm going to hit continue, and I'm going to BRB because I need a breather. Oh my god. How's it already almost 3 PM? That's crazy. Hey guys, I'm back. Yeah, let's get right back into this. I don't think I'm able to beat this boss today. As I lit up, the light grew larger and stronger. Oh, there's no escape from that dark zone. Unless you leave. Also, apparently, the you're taking too long doesn't activate until you have the key or are at like a certain point in the maze. As I lit up light group, go back, you're taking too long, you're taking too long. And then just rush back when you have the key. Here we go. Start to see no walls or something. Mini boss shaped in here. As I lit up like group, but the heat was that pumpkin, that was scary. Just kidding, that was mine. Smiley face. Ow! Shit. To me, like going in here and getting the crunchies. Ouch! Oh my god! Bro! Everything seems okay. Still have beds down, speed up. We don't want that. Treasure hunt. Sushi steps out treasure, it's easier to pick this stuff up. Oh no, I can't find my pumpkin, but maybe I will find you. I think automatically going out the top here is the move, honestly. Got all the little TP boosts. The atmosphere feels tense. You can use Unleash. Unleash. Then Scare Elixir on Ralze. Which is still emanated a brilliant light. Susie, use the Scare Elixir. You dare bring lights to my lair? Haha. This place of true dark. Light has no effect on me. Everything seems okay. As I lit up like crew. No, the light, it has effects on me. Stop using that. Terrible. Go too dark. This is the right one. And then there we go. Susie gets a heal though. So candy, I guess. And then light up. As I lit up like crew. Why'd they use two? That doesn't make sense. We shouldn't go back. Brown face. Oh my god. Genuinely, how are you meant to take it slow through here? Like, actually. There I didn't get hit. It was nice. I could attack her, but here we go. Too dark to see near the walls. There's a pit here. Spit code. And then outside defense. Use spit code. No more Mr. Nice Guy, instead Mr. Very Nice Guy. Eve. Oh my god! Bro! This is insane! How are you actually going to get through here without taking any damage? This is crazy! Like, there's actually no freaking way. And I'm so slow now! What happened? Ow! There we go. Atmosphere feels tense, you can use Unleash. Unleash, and then Susie can actually revive me on Rouse because he can light up. Crystal emanated brilliant light. Susie used revivement. No, not the light, it burns. Do you think my own pellets would be used against me? Too dark to see near the walls. There's a texture of a dog playing maracas in here. Susie needs heal. And Rouse can light up. Rouse needs light up like here. Susie is a scare elixir. Enough, my patience runs thin. No more keys, just humiliation. I forgot how hard this got. Shit. Especially I can't fucking see anything. Taking 2-2? Oh, 2-2! Oh god, oh shit! What the? What? Oh, thank you. Thank you! Wait. Is he gonna come back? I need crunchies. Please. I need. Why is it red? Why is it red? Why? Oh my god! Why did he come back? What the fuck? What the actual fuck? That was actual bullshit. Why did he come back? Oh, motherfucker! This is gonna be in my nightmares. You're taking too long. You're taking too long. This is actually so hard. I hate it. I fucking hate this fight. This is your fate. Please don't give up. I need water. I'll be right back. Again. Hey guys, I'm back. I'm going to check the shop to see if there's any items I missed that are gonna help me. Because this fight is so hard. Like, for no reason. Looks like it's studying. You have anything else? Buggy bunny. Oh, it ain't for me, it's for these fellas. I gotta feed my sweet little recruits, don't I? Get it. Bye. Rapso tea. Sick juice that heals 160. Holy amulet. Thanks, Wahaha. Weapon, Pagekeeper, Scarf, Defense 1. Those both help browsing out. Yeah, that ups the defense. Wait for guard. I'm just if I get 2 of those. Let's get another wait for guard. Oh, I don't have enough money. Shit. It's probably fine. I'll need 2 of those. We're good. And just this way. And back to the fight, I guess. Darkness constricts you. TP gain reduced outside of treasure. Oh, there's no escape from the dark zone unless you leave. Too dark to see near the walls. There's a pit here. I'll use treasure hunt here and then I'll defend again. Oh, I still have the tension bit. Why am I not using that? Go back, you're taking too long. It'll take you too long. There we go. Touch a bit. And then defend, and then light up. As I lit up, the light grew larger and stronger. What the heck was that pumpkin? That was scary. Just kidding, that was mine. Oof. I just follow them. Truly fine. Oh no. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Shit. Shit. I'm just gonna, like, cloud here. Wait, do I get TP from, like, defense? Stuff like that? Ow. The atmosphere feels tense. You can use Unleash. Unleash, and then defend, and then... I should probably heal. That's good code. Crystal emanated brilliant light. Also use spaghetti code. You dare bring lights to my lair? Haha. In this place of true dark, light has no effect on me. I wonder, like, pixels in the sky, or if they just like put together stuff like they did for like the noise boxes. What do you call them? Like the speaky thing when it makes like a little noise. Start to see the walls. There's some mini boss shit here. No, the light, it has effects on me. Stop using that. Terrible. Go to dark. Oh my god. Ow. Ow. Wait, I could have gone straight up here? Good to know. And then just head this way. Nice. Too dark to see near the wall. This texture of a dog playing maracas in here. Just the TV dinner. Have Susie defend, and then have Rose light up. Rose lit up like crew. She's TV dinner. Go back before long. Go back before long. I'm trying to get all the little crunchies. Then flop. There we go. The atmosphere feels tense. You can use Unleash. Nice. Unleash, and then have Susie and Rouse defend. Of course, the soul I made did a brilliant light. No, not the light, it burns. Do you think my own pellets would be used against me? Too dark to see near the walls. There's a pit here. Once I lit up like group. You didn't go back. Frowning face. This one's gonna be such a pain. Ow. 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 Sleep. Ow. Ow. There we go. Too dark to see the walls. Texture of the drop. Dog playing rocks in here. It's dark candy on Chris. Or darker candy, my bad. Susie is the darker candy. No more Mr. Nice Guy, instead, Mr. Very Nice Guy. Leave. I really don't know how you're meant to get through that without hurting. Like that somehow? Odd gamer? They're too dark to see the walls. Scare looks around Susie. Susie can use treasure hunt, and then Rousey can defend. Susie snips up treasure. Chris uses Scar Elixir. Enough, my patience runs thin. No more keys, stress and humiliation. So I have to remember this time. Don't... He comes back, so don't go back into the maze. Oh god. I think that's the first elimination though, so that's good. Yeah, I am taking Tutu. Aw. Aw, thanks, buddy. Oh, this is the last one! The atmosphere feels tense. You can use Unleash. Unleash, and then have... Just eliminated a brilliant light. Wait, I left up Susie's spare. No light, don't bright it close to my face. Oh my god. The light, not the light. No. Oh, he's so cute. No, don't look. I'm too scary. Oh. Are you alright? The chandelier it. Ouchie, oh, it hurts. It hurts. Everything so bright. Couldn't see. Head hit chandelier. We're sorry. We were just looking for a way. Oh, my head. It hurts. It hurts inside. Don't worry. We know how to use healing, so. Ah, it still hurts. I forgot to put my mic back on. My short. There. Sorry, I guess I'll, try it again. Maybe I could... Susie? Nothing. Never mind. How's this? Feel better? No, still hurts. How's the adventure, hero? Old man? Shouldn't you be busy writing a letter or something? Shouldn't you be helping that pumpkin fella? Nah, Rousley's got it covered. I quit. Quit? Quit what? You know, healing. That green sparkle thing. So you don't like doing it? Well, I don't know, actually. At first I was really excited I could do it. But like, I sort of realized I just suck at it. What if you practiced? Put a little shell into it. I mean, when people aren't looking, I was kind of trying to practice a little, but I sort of realized, you know, I'll never be as good as Rousey, so what's the point? So everyone can see how bad I am. I should stick to what I'm good for. You know, hurting people. Magic. Is that so? Didn't take you for a purple-bellied coward. Coward? Hey, what do you mean by that? You're afraid of making some little green sparkles. Look, just casting it isn't a big deal. Alrighty then. Here. What? I pricked my finger with my pen earlier. If you're not a coward, give me your best shot. Fine, if it gets you to shut up. Take this. Oops, my letter. Oh, the ouchie, the hurt, it's gone. Susie? Susie, that was a great idea. Huh? I was wondering why my healing wasn't working. I suppose I was only healing the outside. But Susie, your healing blast seemed to hit the spot. Huh? Well, I was actually just trying to heal that old man. Old man? Yeah, he's... Oh, guess he left. Well, Mr. Jack is better, so let's be on our way. Looks like you'd be able to climb this if you had the right tools. You, girl, you helped me. Hey, it was, you three, my friends. My name is Jackenstein. I was bullied and hated by the others from my large and ugly body. I was banished to the Dark Zone only to appear on festival night. I wear this mask because my true face scares even myself. Did you want to see it? Yes. Cover your eyes. Actually, it's too scary. The point is, you three are more different than the others. You are kind, merciful, and most of all, you don't know how to climb. Take this, my friends, my climbing set. The climb claws. It's too small for me. Hell yeah. This is so freaking cool. Wait, you can just... That's actually really sick. You just jump across. Open treasure chest. Inside was 500 dark dollars. Did I do an oopsie? I think I did. Oh, where am I supposed to climb to? I don't actually know. Oh, up there! I see now. Hells yeah. So freaking goated. Hey, Chris? I can't ensure it will be any good, but, you know, feel free to ask me to heal again if you need it. Oh, that's right back here! It's scary. I'm going back down here and investigating the secrets. Oh, he's back here. Is he like a ghoster? Baby! Hi! Friends, thanks to your bravery, I faced my horrors and escaped the dark zone. Now I clean house for old man. Kind old man gives me a drink called tea. I never forget friends. How can I help? Cute. What? I don't know. I don't know that. What? There's nothing up there. Let's go up here. I did clamor my best, but I found no princess here, unless perhaps this pillar itself is the princess. Alright, there's the thing behind the waterfall I can go to. Now. Oh! Open the treasure chest. Inside was wing blade. Oh, this is for Chris. Not much defense, though. This is a kingdom without king or prince. Flaky disciples, lost in meaningless worship. Old scholars grade my research forgotten. Fairies, princesses, soldiers. On the outskirts, gats, wild beasts of war, and sloth. And of course, a dark night. Oh, let's see what's up here. What's that? Oh, sick. That's how you get it. I see now. I don't know what these points are for. If there even is a point. Oh, there's an uppy part here. Holy shit, big ass piano. We don't know the notes you've got to play, right? Maybe the answer's somewhere around here? Oh god. 3 of these. Missile was woken up. Susie breaks a wet floor sign. Rose makes toothpaste. What are you doing? Am I still dreaming? Missile ho-hums, ho-hums. Everyone sing a lullaby. Am I still dreaming? Am I still dreaming? Missile contemplates going back in her container. Embezzle? Or action. Susie embezzled an item, but she failed. Rosie puts a wet floor sign. What are you doing? God, this is gonna be so hard to avoid. Hopefully they just circle. Yeah. This dozing. Embezzle, and then Rosie can pacify the other one. Susie embezzled an item, but she failed as I cast pacify. Shit! Oh, whatever, I can spare it. I was like, spared embezzle. God, there's so many of these! At least they're all like empty now. New book. So, that piano thingy. Maybe the notes we gotta play are in a book? Hey guys, there's something weird about this one. It looks just like the one that the old man... Hey, look, it did something. Chris, rather than following her, why don't we just close our eyes and think about what she might be doing in there? Sure. Then, let's close our eyes. Guys, I bet it's in here somewhere. Guys? Hey, old man, what are you doing here? Just came here for some peace and quiet to write my letter. Your letter? You know, this is a dream, right? Soon it's gonna end. And everything here, this place, that letter. You don't say. Yeah, but I'll still be here when you wake up. You were trying to teach me something earlier, weren't you? That? Nah, you did all that yourself. Come on, man, you're the only person I've met who teaching me made me actually feel less stupid. Well, it helps that I'm losing my mind, don't it? So, seen anything with music notes on it? Oh, you mean this thingy? Yeah, that thing. Cool. I bet Chris can memorize it and... Here, pen and paper. Wait, you want me to copy all that? Plus, if I got your pen, how do you do your letter? The important part's already done. Besides, what's good as a teacher that doesn't give homework? Screw you. Hey, I got the music copied down, kinda. Might not be perfect, but Rose, where the heck were you? I was, I got the puzzle solution. Let's go. Right this way? Yeah. Crap. Fizzle was woken up. Susie gargles loudly. Rouse sips politely. What is that? What is it? This is a good TP gaining move. This uses a ring left by a cup as a magic circle. Lullaby. Everyone's saying a lullaby. What is it? Am I still dreaming? This assumes effervescently. Susie snores while awake. What is it? What is it? As a contemplates going back in her container. Embezzle. Susie embezzled an item. Stole $100 dark dollars. What are you doing? Miss Liz dozing. So let's wear this one. And then actually I'm gonna try the OK heal on Rousey. Or Spirit Missile. Susie cast OK heal. What are you doing? Missile seems effervescently. Lullaby. Everyone's saying a lullaby. Am I still dreaming? Damn it, Rousey. Missile ho-hums, ho-hums. I spared Missile, but its name wasn't yellow. What are you doing? God damn it, I lost to the stupid water cooler. It's not your fate, please. Don't give up. Oh, we're in here now? Do that. Weird. Okay, so don't ring that bell this time. Because that is a really stupid idea. Alright, Chris, with this, we got into the bag. Sheet music was added to your key items. Chris, maybe I could give it a try. I was like, wait a sec. Chris, today in church, when you were asleep, your mom said you used to play good. I don't know why you're pretending you can't now. Maybe you're, like, embarrassed or something? But, like, you know. Chris, you should play. You thought about Susie's words and took a deep breath. Your hands began to move on their own. For the door. Okay, sweet. Hey, why'd you stop? That was cool. You should, play more. Seriously, you're an idiot if you quit playing. Susie is nice, isn't she, Quiz? Oh, wait. Need a lift? Yes. All aboard. Okay, sick. Let me save here. Wait, there were uppies back. Weren't there? Yes. Back, you zombie! Your beastly existence offends milady. I don't have a milady yet, but if I did, she would be offended. I'm sure there were like climbing bits back here, weren't there? Or did I go back too far? Ouch. Yeah, here we go. Above she waits our beloved holiness, usually pining for the salvation of a great hero. But our legs, small and sweaty in excitement, find no hold in this accursed wall. And so we fall, tumbling again and again. Oh, holy princess is far above. If you would spare but a drop of your love, I promise I should never spill it. Or mix it with powers to modify its flavor? No! No! Shit! How the hell are you meant to do this? This is so hard. Oh, God damn it, don't do that, please. No, what? There we go. Ah, my legs, so they tremble. I'm afeard I cannot clamber any farther. Young soldier, you should meet her. Could you tell her of my exploits? That I may earn so much as a small thimble of her love? Yeah, buddy, sure. Oh my god. Is this like a secret boss or something? Shit. Shit! God damn it. No, don't, no, please. Ah, shit! Motherfucker! Oh, there. There we go. Oh my god. That's so tough. Wait. It's a regular container of water. There's no reason to expect interacting with it to do anything. Don't tell me I came up here for nothing. Maybe if I throw something in? Okay, well that... It's a bit hard to read the characters, but it looks like this. It's a regular container of water. There's no reason to expect interacting with it to do anything. I don't understand. Oh. What? A battle? I really wanted to investigate the water container. Suddenly you have drawn me into a battle? You are brash, young soldier. If you seek my love, you must prove yourself worthy of a princess. It's not your typical water cooler. Chat? I'm gonna chat around the water cooler. All around me did you chatter, but your tepid words have not once been decanted in my direction. Your ignorance scorns me. Speak well of my nature, and you shall be spared. Ow. 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 Water cooler emits an aura of gainous condensation. Beg for mercy. You begged for mercy. Blessed are those who kneel to me, for my waves shall cleanse you. Close your eyes, for as long as you adore my purity, no harm shall follow you. Nice. Susie puts cups on Rouse. Rouse cleans Susie's spill. Flirt? You started with holy water cooler. Romantic are your words. Young soldier, your words are sweet like honeydew. Is it the first time you have spoken to a lady such as I? First time. A young knight's first love. No wellspring may be so pure. I shall accept your affection from afar, stored humbly in a masonry jar. On lonely eves, when I hear not but the bubbling of my heart, I should open it and listen once more to the tender whispers of your kindness. Water cooler stays. Its breath too precious to waste, and he keeps talking. Chat? I want chat around the water cooler. Seems like you should choose a topic. Beauty. No, not as a feigning glory, though my face shining back both sun and moon is brighter and more holier than all stars. As such, my beauty is more of an objective science that cannot be denied. Well said. Seems your affection had caused some change in my form. It's breaking. Wow. You hear the sound of raindrops. Nuzzle? I was a nuzzle Miss Mizzle. Miss Mizzle got a little bit tired. Susie breaks a wet floor sign. Glory, glory. Waves crash far, far below. Embezzle? Susie embezzled an item. But she failed. Alzay makes toothpaste. Glory, glory. You hear the sound of raindrops. Dazzle. And healing prayer, Susie. Dazzled Miss Mizzle. Susie gargles loudly as I cast healing prayer. Glory, glory. Waves crash far, far below. Oh, she's almost good. Nice. Dazzle, defend, and spare. Dazzled Miss Mizzle. As I spared Miss Mizzle. Well, got the XP and $560. So up, stop, up, right. Sorry, King or Potter, there's no reason to expect interacting with it to do anything. So there's half of something. To think our holy princess would join your court. Oh joy! I shall rejoice and throw my greatest powders, electrolytic and a few in calorie. Blessed are you, who walks with Our Lady, and blessed be your legs, for they have nary a bead of sweat. Let's go down here now? Yeah. Is there anything like further back that I can get? Ouch. Oh my god, everyone's almost dead. The others here believe you will bring trouble to this place. They say the night with the plague casts a great shadow on the land. I've no proof that's you, but don't be harsh to those that fight you. I let's just head this way. Oh. Jockington grows the beard. Look at treasure chest inside with Rhapsody. Come 5 o'clock, the shadow will grow. So saith our ancestors. Okay. That's where I came from, basically. Alright. I think about everything there. Is there anything this way? Perhaps. Oh, there's a climbing thing. Actually, let me say first. Alright, climb in. The old man's existence made him imagine Rousey with a beard. You're filled with the power of conceptual bearded Rousey. Recruits. Here's Miss Missile. There's the heavy switch. It's a wall, looks solid. Don't. Too solid. Have the wall. I don't understand what the point of that is. Like, there has to be something with that, right? Oh god. Wait. There's statues in here? Don't tell me that they're all gonna, like, come to life after I go through here. Should be up there, up north. Just up north. Down, stop, right, stop. Oh, these are all... There's a chest in here. No. Oh, maybe, actually. Maybe go back to that one that gave us directions. Oh god. Oh god. Start moving around, are they? Oh, straight. No idea what the hell that's about. There's some head through here. And into here. God, I could really go for some lots of realistics right now. Like, those would hit so good. Alas. There's probably more area to explore somewhere. Let's see here. And this door is open. Alright, we're finally almost back to the fountain. Wait a second there. I got something for ya. Hey, we're about to go in the stream, so... Good timing, I just about finished my letter. Mind delivering it for me? Deliver it? Like I said, when we wake up, it'll be gone, so... Yep, that's what I mean. This letter, just have a read of it for me. Then, when you wake up, write it all back down, okay? Me? Rewrite all of it? Don't you just... This old mind's gotta get some help remembering it. Alright, fine, I'll take a look. Okay, got it. I might miss a few things. You sure you want me to do it? Unless you got the point, words don't matter. Okay, sure. See you later, old man. Alright, let's go get that fountain. No, not yet. We're not doing that yet. Oh, wasn't there an uppy this way? Yeah! Yeah. It's a wall made of bells. Climb it, yes. Climb the wall of bells. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. More in this? Really? That's a dead end. I need to hit this one. Guess not. So this way? No, dead end. I hope this isn't like a secret boss or something. I am not prepared for that. That just leads out. What? Is there an uppy that I'm missing? I can go this way. That is a dead end. I don't quite understand here. It seemed like it went on longer. Can't be a dead end too. What? Oh, it's an uppy. Got it. Hey, we finally got to the end of the stupid room. Huh? Something's coming. Run! Oh my god. Fuck. One thing that I like hate in video games and why I don't play horror games is things chasing me. Like, what happens if this thing gets me? Oh god, dead end. Fuck. Oh my god, where the hell where's anything? Fuck! Am I actually stuck here? I can't tell if I'm moving. Oh my god. I'm just straight up not moving. What the actual fuck am I meant to do? Something, please happen. Oh my god. There's an up here. But again, dead end. Dead end. Once again, dead end. What the actual fuck? I just have 1 HP. What the fuck? What the fuck? Oh my god. This is not your fate. Please, don't give up. Well, it's hard not to when you're stupid bullshit like that. I'm all the way back here. I'm gonna look up what the hell to do there because there was no way for me to go. So, yeah. Apparently, that's his first secret boss. So, I'm not doing that. And I did see something about, like, donating and getting, like, a bunch of money together for a good armor thing. Check out the way for guard for on the silver card. And then I guess I can go grind money. There's this thing apparently where if you like throw enough in the fountain, you can get like a really good armor set. But the guy that gives it to you, I don't know where exactly he is. Isn't there an enemy somewhere? Here. Yeah, up here. Easy proof. Success. Susie attempted to read. It's the best of times was the worst of times. Mumble mumble. So I wonder if there's any reason why characters are like bleeding between chapters. Because this guy was in, like, the room with the egg. Clearly Ox can't keep its pages open. Susie Spirit Bibliox. Browse the Spirit Bibliox. And the Ox opens up. Success. Susie attempted to read. Mumble mumble. Lorem ipsum, Lorem ipsum. Bibliox can't keep its pages open. Success. To buy or not to buy, to buy or not to buy. Because he spared Bibliox, or else I spared Bibliox. That's like an easy 300. I think you only need to do this like a handful of times anyways. I should just have Susie defend for TP. Mumble. Bibliox can't keep its pages open. Success. Who's Dewey? Who's Dewey Decimal? I need to go back and save soon. Bibliox can't keep its pages open. See, spare Bibliox, Frowler spare Bibliox. Yeah, I need to go back and save real quick, and then we're good. I don't know exactly where this secret guy is, though. Oh wait, hold on. I mean, where's that waterfall at? Is that back this way? It is, isn't it? Right? No. Oh, that's to the right of up there. I got it. I don't have that special axe though. So, unless that's what the guy gave me. Yeah, there's some sort of statue. Yes. But it was misspelled. Who's Dewey? Who's Dewey Decimal? The ox can't keep its pages open. Success. Mumble. Human souls, monster souls, book souls. Ow. Bibliox can't keep its pages open. To buy or not to buy. Lorem ipsum, Lorem ipsum. 2 tornadoes. Bibliox can't keep its pages open. So we spare Bibliox. Or else I spare Bibliox. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep grinding for money for now. Success. Human souls, monster souls, book souls. Bibliox can't keep its pages open. Success. Lorem ipsum, Lorem ipsum. It was the best times, was the blurst of times. Ouch. Maybe the last can't keep its pages open. Ow. Shit. That was a bad idea. Maybe the last can't keep its pages open. I should have healed. Motherfucker, I died to this stupid book thing. Yeah, I'm not gonna play for much longer. I am fed up. I'm so fed up. Like, the damage dealt is just so unfair. Mumble. Yeah, the reason I'm doing this is because apparently there's like a really good armor thing if you donate like the max amount of money, like 9999 I think. And the way I'm playing, I absolutely need it. Success. Who's Dewey Decimal? Oh, these tornadoes are so hard to dodge. Maybe lost can't keep its pages open. As I spread Bibliox, mumble. Defend, spare. That was a spare Bibliox. $267. Literally all I have I would like to throw in. Through $2,990 in the fountain now holds 4,210. Oh, she'll heal. Shit. Don't get me. Please don't get me. There. Success. Human souls, monster souls, book souls. I should probably just spare the one guy. And then just farm the other. And spare this one. Success. Mumble. This attack's to worry about this way, I guess. The mouse can't keep its eyes open. Or an Ipsum. This is spare Bibliox. There. But does anyone in chat know how close I am to actually like beating the chapter? Any chance? It's fine if not, I'm just curious. Let me fight or whatever. You suck, you're dyslexic. Who's Dewey? Who's Dewey Decimal? Nice. How's I spray Bibliox? $734. I don't think that's enough for anything. Success. To buy or not to buy. Oh, these tornadoes are such bullshit. I'm swearing way too much. I apologize. I should really put like a mature filter or something. Third Bibliox. There we go, max GP. Nice. I'll just spray Bibliox. Threw $1,001 in the fountain. Oh, I should have peeled. Oh well, mostly fine. It says, mumble mumble, it was the best times, worst of times. God, I'm really not saying much, I'm sorry. So what can I talk about? I mean, after I beat chapter 4 here, what game am I gonna move on to next? I just probably finish Undertale. Just have that done. Maybe Oblivion, but I don't know how I feel about that. I might have gotten past the fun phase, if I'm being honest. But who knows, maybe I can bounce back and beat it. Because all I really have left to do is Mage's College and, like, the main story. Everything else is, like, finished, I believe. I could also just try to buy, like, every single house and just become like Mr. Moneybags. I don't know. I mean, I have a couple things I could play. And have like an entire Steam library of stuff I've just never touched. Like I could do solo Stardew. I could do Tunic, I could do Night in the Woods. Like I said, I have like a bunch of things. I can even do like Morrowind. If I'm still in like an Elder Scrollsy mood. And it's gonna get to a point where I like run out of things to play unless I become like a Roblox streamer. Which technically I could do. I have like the German Roblox shirt on. So it's not like that would be so far-fetched. I don't know how streaming that goes for people normally. Like I don't know if they have to worry about like I don't know, like stream snipers? Because I do use the same username on Roblox. Just how I got my Twitch username. But I don't know. And I could also like get a camera and do like IRL crap like model kits, crochet, cross stitch. Like I have options. It's not like I don't. You know? And there's like stuff coming out that's probably going to be fun to stream. Like, God. I forget what like the concept of what it was, but it was like a Blatcho bike. Like one of those like gambling roguelikes. I forget what it's called. It was like dark something. And that looked like really fun. So I might get that when it comes out. Whenever that comes out. I also have like Zoo Tycoon 2 I could do. If that wants to behave, because like the last time I played, I was getting this weird bug where the zookeepers just did not do anything. The animals wouldn't eat. Like, it was like nothing was working or wanted to. It was so weird. Yeah, probably Undertale after this. Probably do Undertale Yellow at some point too, but I'm gonna PvP real quick. Might be my last one of the day, stream, whatever. And then save the end of chapter 4 for like its own stream. Because I have no idea how much is actually left in the game. I can guess that it's like very close to being finished. But I do also need to do like Snowgrave route here. But yeah. I'm gonna be RB. Leave you guys with this jammy music for a bit. So BRB. Hey guys, I'm back. Yeah, more Deltarune. Woo! Alright, I got it. There. Okay. Yep. There we go. Guess I'll just go through the door after I do this. So I don't think that's quite the end. Who's do we just want to buy or not to buy? Yeah, for the Snowgrave route, I'm gonna try actually like beating all the secret bosses. Like, I know I was having a lot of trouble with Chevel, but I think if I go Snowgrave, or just like defense, or not defense, attack versus just defending, I could probably make it a bit easier for myself, especially with like level up and whatnot. But yeah, how are you guys doing today, by the way? You doing good? I was dealing with like a headache yesterday, which is why I didn't stream. I'm feeling a little better though. I think it's just like a caffeine thing. The night which makes with blackened knife. The night which makes with blackened knife. A duel with heroes, strife by strife. Oh, we're back here already, damn. That was a wee bit. That's right. I remember now. Usually it's like the end of the level though, right? Wait. We should be able to get to the fountain from here. All we have to do is climb up this. Huh? Oh god. Oh, there's the knight. Hey. The knight. Damn it, you aren't stopping us this time. As soon as you wait. So hard to traverse. Ow. Ow. Oh crap, I'm gonna die. Oh my god. Please, no, please, please. Please, please. This is so hard. Oh my god. Crap! It doesn't help that everyone abandoned me. Ugh. Man. This is so hard. hurts so much. Come on. This is so hard. I don't want to do this. God. Like, unless you are perfect with the dodging, this is actually impossible. Crap! Son of a bitch! You know what? It's been 3 hours. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. God. Oh, you can't get down? Seriously? That's nice. It's great. It's exactly what I want. I think I need to tackle this when I'm less pissed at the game. Or else I'm never gonna get anywhere. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll be live like, I don't know, tomorrow maybe? Maybe Friday. I don't know. One of those days, but yeah. Yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah. I don't know how people do this. Like, you could say all you want, it's a skill issue, but like, it's such bullshit. No? Like, I know I'm not the best at games. I know it's plan easy things if I can. But this is ridiculous. I'm gonna give it a while and try tomorrow maybe. We'll see. Yeah, thanks for watching. Have a great afternoon. I know I won't.